Welcome to Day 2 of the February Department of the Air Force Data Summit, hosted by the Department of the Air Force Chief Data Office. Yesterday, we successfully kicked off our first virtual summit, and we do apologize for the technical issues some experienced. We have created a Teams chat room just in case we experience some issues today, but also a place where you all can network, and then also we can give you information about upcoming events and things like that. So that will be added to the chat in a second. We've also included the presentations and read-aheads to our SharePoint site. That was a big ask yesterday, so that's there for you now. And my name is Corey Spate. I am the Governance Branch Lead for SAFCO and your moderator for today. So please note that the Stewardship Framework Working Group will be like yesterday, so I encourage those who attended to participate in a different working group today. Awesome. Thank you for that link. We are still excited to have over 300 RSVPs for this event. The numbers are climbing today. Hopefully we reach there today. We're also excited to have a top Chief Data Officer keynote speaker, whom our very own Department of the Air Force Chief Data Officer, Ms. Eileen Vadrine, will welcome shortly. Also, we have some great presentations lined up for you today. The DAF-I plan to the DoD data strategy, our talent management workforce, and the Blue Horizon Project Dagaba. To get started, I'd like to share a few housekeeping rules. First of all, thank you all again for joining us for our data summit. If you are not the presenter, please keep your camera off and your microphones on mute. Our speakers today will be giving brief overviews of their work in their respective roles, and then we'll be followed with working group breakout sessions. Throughout the presentations, we encourage you to ask questions using the chat feature, whereby our team will be actively capturing those questions. Please limit the questions to those topics being presented. Once we reach the Q&A segment, we will read the questions out loud. And if your question is for a specific presenter, please note that with your question in the chat feature. Lastly, for the best experience, please change your layout to focus or stage to make the primary speaker the main video you see. Now we'll hand it all over to Ms. Eileen Vadrine, the Department Air Force Chief Data Officer, for opening remarks. Ma'am, thank you for leading this effort again. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Corey, and thanks to the team for bringing this together. I'm so excited that we're on to day 2 of our 3rd annual data summit for the Department of the Air Force's Chief Data Office. I mean, it's pretty awesome. And the fact that yesterday we had at our high point over 300 participants actively engaged I think it really just highlights where we are in our journey as we continue down this path. Yesterday, the launch of the Data Summit proved, I think, to be a huge success. The team and I were able to debrief at the close of day 1, and there is amazing progress. The topics came up that came up in the working groups, absolutely on point, and really helped establish some of our goals as we move forward into, further down. And I'm just so excited that we're at this part of our journey. Please accept our apologies. There were a couple of technical challenges. They were not intentional, or it's part of the challenge as we migrate from in-person to virtual, and we're still, I think, pretty early in that journey. But the good news is that we were able to rally as a team, still stay connected, and most importantly, get our working groups to provide amazing input into the process. I understand some of our groups rolled into their working lunch, and the reality is I really appreciate that dedication and commitment. This is really important work, and I'm just grateful for the commitment for all of our participants. We have a very agile team, and if we face any types of difficult meetings today, I know that we're going to persevere as a group, because we always come up with a solution. Airmen and Guardians get it done, and I think that's what's so exciting about our organization. Before I introduce today's keynote speaker, I want to make sure that I wanted to really take a moment to share with you a milestone that occurred this week and it could not have been possible without many of you that are out online today. I am thrilled to announce that we received the final signatures for our Department of the Air Force implementation plan of the Department of Defense data strategy. That is going to give us a foundational roadmap document to help our department not just meet the requirements of the Federal Data Strategy Action Plan, but to truly formalize the business process to operation the DoD strategy for our department. I think that's, and it couldn't have been done without many of you that are out there. So, and this is the first Department of the Air Force data implementation strategy. So thank you all. It's an incredible step forward for our office and for our department. And again, data is a team sport. And I'm grateful that you are part of our team. Today, our keynote speaker is Ms. Joann Stonier from Mastercard. It is my pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker. I'm grateful that she is taking valuable time to really share her journey in her organization with us today. Ms. Joann Stonier serves as the Chief Data Officer for Mastercard, charged with delivering on both the promise and protections of data. She oversees the curation, maintenance, and management of the company's strong data assets as Mastercard increasingly looks into deepening the value it can provide its merchants, banking, and government customers and cardholders through its analytics capabilities. Reinforcing the critical imperative of putting customers and their privacy at the center of data strategy at Mastercard, Joann previously served as the company's Chief Information Governance and Chief Privacy Officer. In that role, she was responsible for worldwide privacy and information governance, as well as leading regulatory engagement in this arena. Prior to joining Mastercard in 2008, she was the Chief Privacy Officer for American Express. She also held several roles with that company, including Chief Operating Officer, American Express Tax and Business Services, Vice President Acquisition and Integration, and Vice President and Assistant to the Chairman. She has also worked for Walden Books, Pepsi, and started her career as an auditor with Price Waterhouse. She often speaks on the need of balancing data and innovation and privacy, and has been recognized as an innovative leader in data and privacy by the Aspen Institute, the United Nations, and the Information Governance Initiative. We are honored to have her speak to us today. Thank you, Ms. Stonier. The floor is yours.
So I'm going to try to share a presentation, giving you all a sense of the journey that we have been on at Mastercard. I appreciate really speaking to all of you. I'm first of all, let me just say I'm honored, awed by so many of you who are in the Air Force or in other branches of the military that are joining today. I work for I'm on the board of directors of a charity called Hope Warriors, and so military service, our service and women are near and dear to my heart. I very much appreciate what all of you do. So I want to thank you all for your service. So I'm going to try to share. Let me see if I get the PowerPoint up and on the screen. Now let me know if you can see it. There it is. So I'm going to put it into slideshow mode. Let's see.
We're good.
Come on. Try it. Take a second to think. There we go. You all see that?
Yes. We're good.
Okay. So I wanted to talk a little bit about ethical data innovation because I do think that that's an important concept in today's busy, data-driven world. And I thought, since I just came from my board of directors, a risk committee meeting of our board, and they were talking about what's top of mind for them here in 2021. I will cover some of their thoughts as we go, as I talk about what our journey has been. And I will take questions, so we'll go through this, I hope, at a pretty good clip. I don't know if you can hear me or not. I'm getting a little bit of feedback.
Hello, I think we have a hot mic. Can everyone make sure their microphones are muted, please?
Okay. So when I was speaking to my board, some of the trends that we're seeing in data today include issues that we are all trying to handle, issues related to cyber, right? Cyber incidents, digital disruption, the acceleration of change, how much change, someone said that everyone else lose sound, right? So I'm going to keep going until somebody tells me not to. How much more data we now have. Really, you think about what has happened in our COVID-19 world, we've seen this acceleration of digital disruption as well as digital innovation. And there's more and more data that we're all being asked to handle as data professionals, but it also comes with increasing amounts of what we're going to call meta risks, right? Meta risks including issues of data quality, data ingestion, using the right data for the right purpose. And then there are issues increasingly of data bias, the social implication of how we're applying data. And then we're seeing in private enterprise, it's a little different when you work for the government, regulation, and that impacts things. And when you really look at it, we also, on the financial services company, when you begin to see how misinformation or clusters of information, we can talk, we were talking this morning about the whole issue with GameStop and Robinhood. You can see how herds can also influence information and what the impact can be on organizations. And so when you think about data ethics, and it's an evolving kind of a concept, it really does have to take root in all of your business practices, and I'm from business, but business practices, your organization's practices, as well as data practices, right? So for some of you, you will not know Mastercard. Many of you will think that you know us. You will have hopefully, Mastercard in your wallet, or you will have it on your phone. I'm trying to quickly pull my little wallet here and pull up my Mastercard. I don't know if you can see me, but my Mastercard on my wallet. We operate in over actually 210 countries and territories. There are 2.6 billion Mastercard cards in circulation, whether that's now a plastic card or embedded in a device. We process over 87 billion transactions per year, and we sit in between banks and merchants. So we do not issue your card. Your card is issued by a bank. The card that I just tried to show you is issued to the Bank of America. Other issuers are Citibank, Wells Fargo, Santander, right, overseas. But what we do is we are also the organization that helps merchants accept those transactions. So we have over 37 million merchants as part of our acceptance network. And so that little Mastercard brand that you see in the corner of the presentation is what we call our acceptance mark. You know, you go into a store or online that our card is accepted as a form of payment. And our goal is to make payments safe, simple, and smart. Okay, that's kind of our mantra, because we recognize that over the course of time, what we have done is we have electrified payments, right? We have electrified commerce. We have made commerce safe and easy. And this is how business generally works, okay? So over here is you, a card holder, and you go to a store or online, you present your card, and in return you get a good or service from a merchant. And it can be any kind of merchant, right? You buy, I don't know, someone may have picked up coffee today, you may have actually wandered out of your house, you may have ordered groceries online, if you're still socially isolating. And what happens then is that transaction goes quickly to the merchant's bank. We call them the acquiring bank. And the card is actually checked to make sure that it's valid. So what we do is we actually are looking at your card number. We're looking at the dollar amount of the transaction, date, time, place of the transaction. And we're checking. We're actually also checking it with the bank that actually issued you your card. That bank is called your issuing bank. And we're making sure that actually your card is actually valid. It hasn't been stolen. There's no fraud on account. and you actually, then the transaction goes through. That actually takes place in milliseconds. You don't realize that that's what's happening when you are presenting your card or keying in the numbers or keying in that security code, but that's in fact what we are doing. So we process the data, but we also are smack in the middle of the transaction to ensure there's no fraud and to provide security. We also do reviews with our bank to also provide them insights and data insights around fraud and security, and to also spot any network insecurities, right? The cyber issue I mentioned at the top of my conversation. So this is what we call our core network, okay? This is a typical transaction record. It looks like when everybody thinks that we have so much more data than we generally do. We do not collect your name. We don't know your name. We do not know your address. We do not collect a phone number. Typically, this is the information we have. But it's actually very, very powerful information. Okay, it's very powerful information. Why? Because with aggregations of information, and I'll start here, we actually know a lot about you when it's all about the card number. We actually can tell that a card has where you've been if you begin to time and merchant location stamp it. So it helps with our fraud analytics. It helps us, with our cyber security solutions. We also are beginning to be increasingly using data to provide digital identity solutions, and there we do collect more data. We do analytics for our customers. Now, who are our customers? Well, we love all our cardholders. Our customers are actually mostly our banks. They're also increasingly governments. There are merchants, as well as we have a whole arm of our business that is for social good. So we do a whole bunch of data analytics and economic analytics for financial inclusion. That's really in order to advance and serve the underbanked. We do a whole bunch of market and loyalty programs that is mostly in partnership with our banks, although many of you will know our price programs, which are direct to our cardholders. Increasingly, we are doing programs for what they call open banking. And so what is open banking? Open banking is a relatively new phenomenon with fintech, like Robinhood, like Mint, where we have more and more financial solutions are being provided to consumers via this lovely cell phone device, where we are actually working with fintechs outside of normal banking to provide finance solutions that are no longer provided by banks. And then we also provide economic and government insights, because our data over time and when in sequence can actually be very helpful for different governments and government agencies to understand patterns of what's going on. And during COVID, if you think about what we do, we've actually able to understand what was economically going to start happening as we watched the virus march across the globe earlier in 2020, as we watched what happened in Asia and then in Europe and in the United States. We could actually warn local governments what was likely to happen as they began to close for their economy. This is our expanding data profile. People know us for what I just talked to you about, but over the course since 1997, and I joined the firm right around here in between 2009 and 2010, we have been doing more and more with data, okay? And it's really been a journey for us to really move from this traditional financial services processing company to a company that really provides also fraud analytics and insights. We now do a whole bunch of debit transactions and multi-rail transactions. We just acquired Finicity, which is part of that open banking strategy. APT, the analytics company that we acquired. So our data footprint and the services that we now do are much more data-driven, data analytics-driven. What someone would say is a very offensive use of our data to provide analytics out into the world rather than just process data, which is what we did earlier in our company's history. Now, let's start talking about ethics. We have had for the longest time a dedication to security. Because I go back to this slide, you can't do this without providing security around the transaction. And every day, every minute, by the time I finish the sentence, we have over 22 million attempts on our network. That's astounding, but that's the truth. because of our globality and the amount of financial information that cyber criminals find very, very valuable. So our first mandate when we started as a company was to really provide excellent information security. And we've grown, as the criminals have grown, we've grown sophistication, and we have to stay a step ahead of them. Our next mandate was really to provide our data with right privacy controls. Because even though I said we don't have your name, we also had to ensure that we didn't allow for anyone's information to ever be identified. So when I talked about this, you notice over here anonymization. All of the work we do, we strip out this card number. We never use it. We never share this information with anybody. We use it only in its aggregated form and in an anonymous methodology. We've grown in sophistication in that area in order to provide the insights that all of these tools that we've acquired allow us to do so. How we do that is through this governance process. And so every single product or solution at Mastercard goes through what we call now Studio, but a product development process to frame what we want to do, a concept, prototype, market test, launch, and then ultimately enhancement. And throughout this process, my team and I are embedded in the process, looking at the data requirements and considerations, answering all of these questions on what data is needed, what will be ingested, what data will be generated, what data sources will be used, the quality of those sources, what are the combinations, what's the volume, the completeness of the data, and do we have the right rights and consents to use the data? And our business and our product development teams actually are actively engaged in all of these inquiries, right? And a lot of this is beginning to be automated for us so that we can put kind of products into green, yellow, orange, red, and purple categories. But as we use new tools like AI, which I'll talk about, we're getting deeper and deeper into the conversations with our product development folks to make sure that every data-driven product and solution is vetted every single step of the way with a data professional. And this is one of the ways we stay one step ahead in data practices, because our goal is to use data for innovation, but in a way that honors, yes, security, honors privacy, but also begin to make sure that our entire team at Mastercard is accountable for how we're using data. And we're thinking about some of the emerging risks around data to ensure that we are actually addressing best use of our data in a way that makes sense not only for us, for our customers, for consumers, for regulators, for partners, as well as for the innovation that's going to matter in the next generation. In 2019, we launched an effort called the Data Responsibility Imperative. And so what we did with this was a way for us to begin to formalize what we were doing in this process that continues to refine and expanded. But it was a way to begin to put a stab at our commitment to data ethics, world-class privacy and security, as well as trusted incident response. We were saying, okay, what is it that we believe that we have put as coordinates as we design product and solutions? And we started with this inner circle here, which is that our data practices were going to be dedicated to the rights of the individual. Because even though we are a B2B2C company, we're not really a direct-to-consumer company where we really interact with other businesses. We are a B2C brand. And all of our products, all of our solutions are ultimately used by individuals. And we believed very strongly that an individual owns their data, right, especially their personal data, that they should be able to control the use of it, right? Nobody has better rights to the name Joann Stonier than I do, and I should be able to control it. Now, while MasterCard doesn't have that name unless I give it to us, right, should still have the ability to understand my card number is being used. That we should also, we believe that individuals should understand the benefits that they're getting from the use of data. And that's often tricky in this day and age. So if you think about it, I talked about fraud, and I talked about that we use the card number to monitor for fraud. But I don't know that every individual completely understands that we provide the benefit. They should, right? And they should be able to control it, but they don't always understand what the benefits are that they're deriving when they give data to an organization. And you think of any organization that you, an individual, have given your data to. You have, chances are, during this pandemic, you have given your data to Amazon. Now, you believe you've given your data to Amazon or any other vendor, right, buy a good, to get a good delivered to you, right, to purchase it. And some of that data, I just explain what data I get as Mastercard if you use your Mastercard. But then you've given additional data to get the good delivered to your house because we've been staying home. Now, any additional use of that data beyond the delivery of the good or service, you should understand what it is, and you should be able to control it. That's what we are saying by these principles. And then obviously we believe that any personal data that you have given us should be protected. So if we believed this, if this is what guides us, right, all the decisions we make during our product development process, realize that that everybody was going to say to us, well, so what, Mastercard, if you believe this, what are you doing about it? And that's really where these outer principles came from. And we start, of course, our strong suit of security and privacy. That we provide world-class security on our network and in all of our product solutions, that we're going to be guided by. That we're going to be guided by this idea of an individual owning their data, and that we will honor that, and that we will protect personal information when we receive it, even if it's just the account number, even if the smallest amount, we will provide world-class privacy. We will be accountable for how we use the data. We will be transparent and explain how we do it, and we will provide control where we can. Sometimes we get data not directly from the consumer, we get it from the bank, but we will provide individuals with that understanding. Integrity was a principle we came up with as we were trying to think about the next generation of data use. And we were talking about things about data accuracy, and we're thinking a lot about bias, and we're thinking about AI. And we're going to talk about how are we really talking about the logistics of managing data into the future, and that we would have integrity as we build new data practices and would keep pace with also innovation. We wanted to say, I'm proud that we're going to use data for innovation, and that we would also innovate the right kind of data, responsible data practices alongside our use data for innovation. And then I mentioned social impact. Mastercard has a dedication to social impact, just part and parcel of our business. And we also wanted to be everybody aware we will use our data for social impact, and we have during COVID. We have previous COVID during hurricanes or climate events, when we've used our data to be able to give first responders information to say, you know what, these stores are now opening, you can go get gas, right? You can go fuel up so that you can continue to help. But we've given that information, for example, to the Red Cross, the local city governments. As life go on and citizens want to know where can they get food, water, gas, etc. So that's what we mean by that we'll use data for social impact. Okay, I'm seeing a whole bunch of questions. I'm going to try to plow on so I can get a question. We also, these principles guide everything that we do. And so while we have core governance around data requirements and considerations, quality, our data use, we're beginning to now move further into issues of data bias assessments, automation, and continuous monitoring of our output, as well as engagement with partnerships. Because we recognize that while we're good, we're only as good as the ecosystem we first operate, which is kind of easier, but also as we integrate with other partners for execution of data, which is increasingly a problem. I'm going to quickly go through this. I can get to questions, but one of the things is we've developed layers of data governance. We've started to really look at AI. And so this is just a quick overview of how our AI governance works. We look at the purpose, of what the AI is supposed to be addressing. We look at we do a heavy data evaluation, and I can't stress this enough. So I talk a lot about how in typical data analytics we say, if you find this condition in data, then the machine will do this. In AI, we're saying, look at all the beautiful data and tell us what the data says. The challenge with that is that you need to know the condition of that data, and you have to look for the inherent problems in that data set before you can use it. You need to understand what your models are trying to do and what you're actually trying to accomplish. That's why 1 and 3 are linked. You have to understand how your models are behaving. You have to assess them. And what we're doing at Mastercard, we actually have built observational AI models to actually observe the initial model and generate outputs so we can understand, is the model actually behaving the way it was intended? It's actually very time-consuming and consumes an awful lot of technology power. These are some of the biases that we look for each step in the input data, in the algorithms as they're built. We recognize that we can have cognitive bias just in how the analytics are phrased. And what we look, obviously, for models, but we also look to see, do we have problems in the application? And so these are some of the steps that we take in order to assess what we are doing. I'm going to pause here because I know there's a whole bunch of questions and I do want to answer them. So I'm going to actually stop sharing so that I can actually see some of the chat, and I can come back to the presentation if that's helpful. But I may just, let me see if I can go to the chat. There are a lot of questions that have been putting up as I've been speaking, and I do want to get to some of them. So some of these are not mine. Some of them are not Mike.
Yeah, ma'am. This is Corey Spade. I can ask the questions for you so we can
sure.
get the most relevant ones. But
okay.
Yep. If you want to push through, or if you want to go to questions.
No, we can go to questions. That's fine. So,
okay, awesome.
Okay, so, all right. There's a whole bunch here. Okay.
I'll ask the first question for you.
Okay.
Thank you for the presentation first. Thank you for that. So how do we recruit and retain top data talent in today's competitive market?
This comes up on every single call I have with chief data officers. Again, I'm going to stop sharing so I can see you guys. This comes up on every single call that in conference that I go to. Answer that I'm going to give you, you're not going to like. So let me first tell you the real big secret. There's not enough data talent in the world for the evolving data needs, okay? That's the horrible truth, that we are evolving, and I'm going to hazard a guess, I can't see many of you, but that I'm going to hazard a guess that many of you did not put your careers out in data. You started out in engineering, you started out in finance, you started out in some analytic field, you started out in technology, but you started out in some analytic field and drifted into data, right? And so we have to look at, and only now are we seeing data science degrees and programs, because I've helped create curriculums, and now we're actually seeing curriculums getting built at universities for broader data skills, okay? Carnegie Mellon is one of the universities I'm currently working with that's broadening and beginning to offer a comprehensive degree. So number one, you've got to look at the schools offering it, and you've got to think about how you train up and figure out, can you bring in people at the younger end of the spectrum and bring into your organization so you create a pipeline of talent, number one. Look at the successful people in your organization and what is their profile, what's their talent profile, and begin to build the skills inventory of what you need. And how did you and interview some of your top talent of journey they took to be effective in their jobs, because we do not have enough people, and the war on talent, I hate to say it, is also about money for the next generations, and they want two things. They not only want to be paid well, they want to know what kind of experience you offer them, right? So how are you going to train? So you also need to begin to develop a very compelling training and opportunity program. Notice I didn't say just training. It's got to be an opportunity program. So how are you going to move them around our organization so that they feel that they are learning and adding to their skill set? So those two things generally begin to attract talent to your organization, as well as how you speak about what matters to the enterprise about what you're doing with data. People want to work on interesting projects and develop the next generation solutions. But it is really a challenge. I'm not going to kid you. It is going to take us, I think, quite a number of years to have an adequate pipeline in the marketplace. Every place I go on the board of directors of a high school, I talk to them about this. This is the next generation of students everywhere should be learning about data because data is being embedded, I think, in just about every job. But that's my opinion.
Awesome. Thank you. We have another question for you. What would you like to see transform in Mastercard in the next 5 years?
Wow. It's funny. So, I told you I just came from the conversation with the board, and we were talking about a triangle of issues, right, that we will need to address, that meta issues. Let me first say that. Cyber data and privacy on one side, regulation on another, and then the democratization of digitization, which lower barriers of entry. Okay, so if you look at those as the key risks facing our enterprise, in the center of that, right, all of the assets we have as a company to address. What I want to see is how are we going to use the amazing assets we have, which is our data and our network, right? I talked about the connectivity globally and how we connect banks, merchants, governments, and individuals globally. I'm really, really excited to see how we navigate what do we need, what problems do we need to solve. So I mentioned digital identity. We are hoping to become one of the companies that helps to navigate the issues of identity. You know how all of us have to keep track of all those darn passwords, right? We're hoping we can come up with a mousetrap around that so that we can certify who you are digitally, enable that validation digitally in a way that's safe and secure without constantly exchanging information and making everybody vulnerable to cyber events. So I'm looking forward to those type of solutions, which will also, I think, help us with things like the COVID passport we're all looking forward to, right? We can travel again. So those are the types of solutions that I'm looking forward to being part of building a master.
Awesome. How do you interact with social media to increase data security?
Oh, okay. There's two pieces to social media and data security, right? So data security starts with your employees. You don't know that. I'm here to tell that, right? Your weakest link will be your employees, aka phishing and social media, right? So social media is one of the places you need to really talk to your employees about what they put on their social media profile, right? So there's a whole education point on social media and your employees, right? And I hope you're already doing that, and I see some nods, but it's a top near and dear to our hearts at Mastercard, right? Because the cyber criminals are looking at the social media profiles, not only of your executives, but of your employees, right? Of your rank and file, and they want to know about them. Why? Because going to pinpoint those vulnerabilities and then send them a spear phishing email, and they're going to try to get in. And unfortunately, email is going to be a doorway. We have to communicate with each other, right? And it's an excellent doorway for malware. And so that's my first thought about social media. Okay, so number one, protect yourself and educate your teams about that vulnerability. Number one. It also really, when you start doing that, it engenders a really interesting conversation about employees use social media. How do we use social media as a company, right? And how should organizations use social media? Because social media is a communications vehicle, but what do you want out there? And your employees can either be an ambassador for you, and that can either be an ambassador for good or an ambassador for bad, right? Now, we have a culture of decency at Mastercard. I don't know if that's out in the world, but we know about it. We talk about it a lot. We talk about how do you want to be remembered in this world, right? And that's the whole thing about DQ, decency quotient. So it's kind of like your IQ. Everybody talks about their IQ gets really, I'm really smart. We also talk about EQ, emotional intelligence, how do you interact with people. But DQ is how you show up. And so we talk a lot about that about social media. And so our social media interactions very much reflect that. And we want to be a company that also is respected for data. And so partly we also have a very big, I don't want to say it's a presence, but it's a very specific point of view of trying to encourage other organizations to come along with us the ride of ethical and responsible data practices. Because as you all know, and I'm not going to name who they are because you know them, there are plenty of bad actors out in the world who are misusing the trust that consumers and individuals have placed in their hands and misusing their data, right? And we don't want to be one of them. We think that's actually not a sustainable business practice.
Awesome. Thank you. The credit card and banking worlds have a lot of legacy systems, but lots of new tech. How have you managed disparate stakeholders?
Have you been to my data warehouse?
How have you managed disparate stakeholders with different levels of data maturity to keep the whole system moving to the future? This is very similar to the Air Force's.
Oh, probably is. I was going to say, let me guess, we might share something here in common. So first of all, I applaud all of you because you are on a data journey and yet mirrors mine. And the first thing I want to say to you is that there are more of us than what I call the digital native companies that started out digital, right? And they have a leg up on us because they had less legacy. They're beginning to have legacy now though, right? They're now reaching kind of teenage years and they're hitting their own growth bumps and lumps, right? We all had to transform over time our systems, right? It's kind of, and because I'm talking the Air Force, this actually works again, because I use it all the time, right? It's flying the plane, right, while you're building it, right, or changing it out, or changing out the engine and fixing it. You guys have to be really good at that. I guarantee you are a team that knows how to do that. We do that all the time. It's part of long-term planning, right? How do you retire a legacy system, and how do you do it in a way, though, that there's no hiccups, right? We can't let the payment network go down any more than you can let any of our planes go down and let down any of the military protections for the United States. So it requires a lot of planning, it requires a lot of coordinating, it requires a lot of testing. And I won't tell you, because you won't know me, about the days that we scramble when things have not gone perfectly, right? But we do a lot of testing. And we also do a lot of drills and it's kind of similar to incident response, where we have coordinated teams that will go off and do a coordinated exercise to test it out before we start removing components, right? So we will actually build an environment that mimics the environment that we're changing to start seeing what's the most fragile piece before we actually implement the plan. And so it's a way of changing out the old infrastructure and understanding that this piece is actually the brick that's going to send the whole thing tumbling ahead. And so you know that ahead of time. So you can design the plan around that. Excuse me. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah. Awesome. So we just got word that you had a couple more minutes for one more question. So we'll ask this for our final question. In the comments, Ms. Stonier, thank you for relating your experiences. How much of the IT spectrum does Mastercard do organically versus outsource? I imagine Mastercard has gone through a learning process as they transform to data-enabled organization. Many companies start out thinking they will build the full spectrum of IT analytics organically, which are data systems, tech stack on which they reside. Can you give us a brief summary of that journey and where the company eventually settled?
Sure. Yes, you are correct that, by virtue of the data we have, okay, our bias always was, we can do it. We're big. We're Mastercard. Look at all the data we have and we want to protect it, right? So remember, information security is kind of job one. We learned quickly that some things we're really good at and some things not so much, right? So I would still say that protection of information, core network processing, we still build a lot ourselves. We have to. I cannot have that information. I cannot have that information out into the world. So there's a fair amount of that information that's homegrown. That being said, analytics, workbenches, tools that help us bring new sources of data for evaluation. My business colleagues who are testing various new tools and methodologies, we test a lot of stuff now from the market. So we've built an environment to do that. So it's been a journey. I would say when I first joined, everything was almost homegrown. Now I would say the mix probably 70-30, probably heading closer to 60-40. But our core is, I don't know if you were looking at our core business, it's probably almost always going to be home, although more of it's moved to the cloud, but obviously than the warehouse that was. and, being in prominent use when I first joined. The infrastructure has certainly changed. The methodology and the tools, right, have changed. But some of it we're still going to homegrown probably for the foreseeable future. But it's definitely been a journey. I'd say the fighting has definitely lessened. That happened probably 5 years ago. We had a lot of bloody noses about, are we going to build it in-house or are we going to use a vendor? But we finally got our act together around that.
Awesome, ma'am. It has been a pleasure. We appreciate everything. Ms. Adrien, I'll let you.
Well, on behalf of the Department of the Air Force, 2 military services, both Air and Space Forces, I would like to thank you for joining us today. I know I loved your tagline about governance, guiding data, the data innovation process. Our department is very innovative, forward-thinking, and to think it's banded around a governance process, to me, it's literally on my Post-it note that stuck to my other computer. But thank you for sharing your journey with us today, because I think that everybody that the 230 plus people that are online with me today, we have all learned a huge amount. So thank you for sharing your journey. This was amazing.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to have joined you guys. I hope it was useful, and I wish you a great day and a good conference. And I wish you a good journey as well. And thank you again for everything that you do. So I will say goodbye. All right. Bye-bye, everybody.
Thank you, ma'am.
Enjoy your day.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay. Bye-bye.